I'd like to call this committee of the whole meeting to order. And we're right on time, 9 o'clock. Before I start, I'd just like to make an announcement in regards to the city's public works. Congratulations and kudos to them. Great job on Gyro Park. I've had so many calls and comments from residents and people driving through, and I'd really like this passed on to them. They did an excellent job. Please pass it on, Mr. Reed.
Yes, it's beautiful. It looks really, really nice. Well done.
Yeah.
All right. Can I have a motion to adopt the December 11th agenda as presented? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Ross. Only need one. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Just a reminder that there will be an in-camera meeting directly following the committee of the whole meeting. Moving forward on to item 3, which is the register of petitions and delegations. The recommendation is the committee of the whole receives the information update on the dog park use from the user group. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
Kathy Novotchinoff, dog trainer in town, also the crazy dog lady that keeps doing this stuff. That one, yeah. And this is my first thing I've ever downloaded from the cloud. Isn't that amazing? At my age. Okay, the Grand Forks Dog Park, as you know, we've gone through some renovations. And I thought, you know, it'd be kind of nice to know where we came from. So 9 years ago, a group of dog owners got together with the idea of creating a dog park, and it was a diverse group of people. We did some fundraising, and the city at the time, Chris Moslin was on council as well, and he was very helpful in getting us to open this small park, which everybody comes in and says, oh, it's small. But I say, it's good, it's nice. It's a beautiful location on 18th Street. It's actually overlooking the slough, which is a lot prettier than it sounds. We have year-round water. We have a lovely set of stairs, and a human washroom was added because a lot of our users are actually seniors who have kids with them. Okay. Park is used regularly. There's a variety of dog owners that use the park. What it does is it helps them to socialize their dog, so the dogs become good citizens. If you ever walk down the street and see a dog lunging at the end of the leash barking at you, that is a poorly socialized dog. It's not a vicious dog. What we want to get is we want to get people comfortable going out so the dogs meet and see everything and nothing becomes, they don't become afraid of things. Okay? And you know, if you know, when you were young and you thought the German Shepherd was a really good idea, or the Pointer was a really good idea, as you get a little bit older, you need to run the energy off those adolescent dogs. And it's amazingly fun to watch. We promote responsible dog ownership. Not a single time that we don't point and say, are you going to pick that up? Okay? And the community aspect of it is amazing. A couple of years ago, I think there was a birthday cake for a 75-year-old woman that they which doesn't sound like much, but can you imagine? You know, maybe nobody else had thought to do it. Okay? 2016, we approached the city about some improvements. We wanted an expansion and a division into 2 sections. Okay? If you look at this picture, this is of the opening. Do you see that fence way back there? That's the expansion. It's huge. You can actually throw a ball in there and not have to retrieve it over the fence. Okay. And this was at the opening, and you can see a whole bunch of different things in that picture. I'm going to point out a couple of things. There's a woman in there who's very new to the city, and this is one of her first introductions. She has a young dog. She and her husband have a young dog, and they've come and joined us, and they're just delighted at how well received they've been. And that cute little gray fluff ball is mine, by my friend. Okay, and we have a shelter. It's hot in the summer. The dogs like it, we don't. It's cold in the winter, and it gets wet. And there are many of us that spend the winter watching our dogs run off energy so we don't have to trek through the snow and the ice. The official opening was December 11th. And that's as we're talking up there. Okay? And that shows the 2 sections. The other fence you see in the background there is the smaller area of the dog park. Initially, we wanted an area for smaller dogs. But I think we're leaning along the attitude that if the tot lot people can get along, so can the dog people. So now it's just two sections, okay? And it was great. I happened to be there yesterday introducing a bunch of new people to it, and it was lovely to have two areas we could play in. If you weren't getting along with one crowd, you could go in with the other crowd. Okay? This is going to be short and sweet. The dog owners and their canine partners want to give a huge thank you to City Council and to city workers and all those involved in the project. It is an amazing amount of work. It just looks so bright, shiny, and new that even one of the dog people was inspired to decorate it for Christmas. And we're just thrilled with the expanded two-section dog park and the shelter, and I can't say enough about how well done the job was. It was just amazing to see it all come together like that at the end. We're going to try to get some statistics on how well used it is. Because I'm a positive reward person, I think we're going to offer a prize for the person who attends the park most often and signs in. That's positive. But we'll let you know how it's going. But as I said, it is just wonderful. And if you ever get a chance, if there are dogs there, we're all very friendly people. Go and watch and play. It's loads of fun. And that's it. Short and sweet. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howard?
I'm not going to click forward. You want me to click forward?
You just have to turn your button on there for the microphone.
Oh, technology. Thank you.
Yeah, I was there for the opening and I was totally impressed with how many people showed up and how many dogs there were. And it was amazing. I thought, wow, this is really well used. I had my dog with me in the car and I was really nervous about bringing him out because he's not used to socializing.
And that's the beauty of two parts. I have a dog that doesn't particularly like to socialize, but she was able to be in the small area and watch it from a distance. And the interesting thing about it is, when we first did the dog park, we had people that were there for the first dog park, and we had people with dogs there that I'd never met yet at that opening. And I think that's what brings together that community. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's great. It's going to be well used, and I'm glad that we have that.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Just like to weigh in briefly on that too. I've known Ed for a lot of years now, and he's been keeping statistics at the front when you sign in, which is phenomenal when I've seen the amount of attendance that we've already had. Going back to the original park, with no condescending remarks, but when I first moved to Grand Forks, I looked at it and I said, it looks like a postage stamp. It's got to be a lot bigger than this. You can't even run around. You got to go outside to change your mind. So, really great, and I think it expanded well. The city did an awesome job. And one comment I had, Dave, we might want to get a phony fire hydrant right in the middle of the park. I've seen one in another community.
There's our UBCM trade show.
Yeah, exactly. But again, well done, and keep up the good work.
I might even have one of those hanging.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Butler?
Yeah, I don't have a dog anymore. I wish I did. But I borrow my neighbor's dog sometimes. And I just think it's wonderful, like you said, the amount of community that forms. You know, a small investment from the city, but big rewards for a small investment. And I think it's great that you guys can all gather, and especially introducing someone new to the community.
Oh,
it's important.
They've just welcomed open arms.
And it's great for people who travel with their dogs, because most of us travel with our dogs. And they can come into town, the dog needs an exercise and a leg stretch, off to the dog park, meet new people.
How do they find it, though, if they're traveling through?
That is something we have yet to work on, is signage.
Yeah.
And something in your tourist brochure to let them know where it is. There is a Facebook page for Grand Forks Dog Park, and a lot of it's just word of mouth. People talk about, I go here to the dog park, where is it? Tell them, and they show up and they tell their friends. And
I think we could also maybe do some flyers to motels, which would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's fine on the road.
People still ask.
I've already spoken to the RDKB on that too, and we missed it this year on their maps that they put out, but they're looking at next year possibly putting it in there too. Speaking of which, there's one other item I forgot to mention, which for those that weren't at the grand opening, I'd like to give a thumbs up and a great thank you to the people that sponsored it. Dave Parsons from Interfor and Mike Holmes from Morrissey Creek, to name just a few, because these were the ones that I rallied at the beginning that they should kick in for the city's behalf, and they did. They came through. And also the city staff again that coordinated it and did quite a bit of the work.
As well as coverage from the Gazette. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We hope to be on the front page of the newspaper and show everybody what a wonderful facility it is.
Great news, good news story again.
Yes, it is. Yes, thank you, everybody.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor to receive. Anyone opposed? So carried. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Okay. We have nothing on item
Thank you. I'll
4,
put these in there right
regional topics,
now.
because our
Thanks,
director is
Pat.
not present with us this morning. Moving on to the item 5A, presentations from staff, policy 801-A1, Bank Authority, Chief Financial Officer. Resolved, the committee will receive the report regarding the bank signing of authorization policy 801 revision V2 and refers the policy to January 15, 2018 regular meeting for approval consideration. Mover, please. Councillor Tripp. Discussion, Councillor Butler.
Oh, sorry, I forgot I was seconding it.
No, second, we don't need discussion.
Yeah.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to our CFO. The policy 801 that I'm seeing that says established January 13th, 2014, is that the one? I didn't see version V2 in the agenda. Maybe that's just me missing it.
I'm not sure if it was in the agenda or not, but this is the new format, and so it has the actual original establishment date of the original policy. So I thought it was in the agenda, but it's possible that it wasn't.
So the new policy would then incorporate the changes that you've identified in your memorandum.
That is the new policy.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is the new policy. I thought you were referring to the original policy not being in the agenda.
Okay, good. That's fine. I'm just noticing that it doesn't say version 2. So this is why.
It's not in there.
That's
Or here it is. Here's your book. It's at the book.
Yes, this is the original policy, or the last version, revision of the original policy.
Councillor Butler. Councillor Tripp.
Yeah, so we have the new policy in a new format, and I'm just wondering, are you going to be switching all our policies over to this new format? It seems like a lot of work. I'm not sure why you wouldn't stick to the original format and just update the information in it.
CEO.
Your Worship, just moving forward with our policies, this will be the new format. We're not going to go backwards and changing. That would be
Oh, okay.
one of those lifelong things. As we're renewing them, I think the plan is that within the next couple of years, we're going to be reviewing a lot of our policies. And at that point in time, then we would be making the transition as we change the policies.
Councillor Tripp.
Mayor Conrad. Yeah, to the CFO. The comment that had been made was that there were just a few minor housekeeping revisions, and I tried to reconcile between the two policies, and I don't see a lot of similarities. So I'm just wondering, was the policy just on whole decided to go into a new format and cover new things, or will the old policy be incorporated into the new one in any way?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, the underlying premise of the policy is unchanged, and that is that checks and payments under $25,000 can be signed by 2 staff members who have authorization, but payments over $25,000 need approval of the mayor or another member of council and a member of staff. So other than that, the other changes are just some clarifications on other types of payments, like processing of pre-authorized payments and processing of the payroll. So the other major addition or significant addition is to allow just one signature for transfers between the city's accounts. And the reason for that is that transfers need to be done from reserves to settle capital expenditures per the financial plan, and also to transfer funds that come through the operating account in error that need to be transferred, or that come through the operating account that need to go into the reserves. And there's no risk there because it's just account transfers.
Councillor Tripp, follow up?
Yes, if I may, what I found very confusing between the two documents is that there doesn't seem to be any interrelating categories. The policy intent is actually different wording, and pretty much the whole way through. So I would find it helpful if in future, when a policy is coming forward to be changed, that maybe we could see the different sections of the old policy with the new wording, then we'd be able to see very clearly where the changes are. I found this needed me printing out and actually examining side by side to see what the differences were. So just as a I don't know if that's a lot of extra work, but to me it just would be, I think it would be easier for us councillors if we could just see the different categories put down there together, so that we're not struggling to figure out, is this new, is this old, what's being changed and what isn't.
Are you referring to a highlighted, like a similar, almost a highlighted portion of the items?
Yeah, I know we've had that done in other policies where it makes it really easy to see what is being changed. With this, because the format was completely different, you didn't even have the same sections anymore. So you couldn't really compare apples to apples.
How big a job would that be to have the notations on the side highlighted or showing indicative of the changes?
The new formatting is quite different from what's been done originally, so it would be very difficult to actually do that. And that's why I summarized in the RFD the major changes, because this is and this new format is in line with what we will be doing going forward. It's
Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, I also checked the two policies, and I didn't see anything major that, I mean, a different format, different verbiage. My confusion was that it just missed version 2 on the actual policy that we're looking to.
I think it says it at the lower left-hand corner of each page. The V2 revision, I believe it says.
Okay, well, thank you. I missed that.
Yeah.
So other than that, I don't have a problem with the policy. I think it incorporates exactly what has been done and will continue to be done, just in a different format with the highlighted changes that our CFO included in her memorandum.
I would imagine if we upgrade some of our policies to our new format, if there's major changes, I guess it would be a good idea then, possibly when we're reviewing it before implementing it, maybe to have a note if it's a real major change. Although if we can't see it, then somehow anyway, we should be able to notice it right away, but just in case. All right, any other questions? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Moving on to item 5B, memo schedule for 2018 financial plan from our Chief Financial Officer. Recommendations committee all receives for information the memorandum of the schedule for 2018 financial plan from the Chief Financial Officer. Mover, please. Councillor Butler. Discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. 5C, memo, highlight discussion of public hearing on OCP and zoning bylaw changes from our Manager of Development Engineering Services. Recommendation committee to all receives for information. Memorandum of the highlight discussion of the public hearing on the OCP and zoning bylaw changes from the Manager of Development Engineering Services. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Hammond. Okay. All those in favor?
Well, I just wanted to say,
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to compliment our staff on the highlights of this. I found it very helpful and informative, and thank you.
Any other discussion? Councillor Butler.
Yeah, just a question that was brought to be my members of the public with the tiny homes. When you have mobile homes, you always have a front door and back door, but a lot of these tiny homes, they just have the one door. So for fire, why are you scowling at me?
I didn't notice that. That's a good point.
For fire regulations, I'm just wondering if the fire department has had a chance to look over the changes and how they reconcile that difference with only having one fire exit.
Bigger windows.
They don't have big windows now.
Go ahead.
Through the mayor, thank you. Staff has discussed this in detail internally and in discussions with the building inspector. Secondary egress, so an opening window large enough. That's the standard from the bedroom area is required, and that basically takes care of egress the same way that a basement suite requiring a large window would require that, as opposed to a second door.
Exactly. That's why I was joking, bigger window, but you need a bigger one. Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, this was a very good report, but what I did find was that there were some comments from the public that weren't included, and I do see that they have been included in our meeting tonight. The regular meeting agenda has some documents that are attached about that, so I'm happy to see that. But I know that there were other concerns that people had come forward with, and some of them were, to have a bit of more diversification in terms of the zoning around town and not have the tiny houses put in every single zone. And that was an issue for some people that were here, and I know that isn't reported in this. As I say, however, it is in tonight's regular meeting material that we'll be getting. The other thing I just wanted to comment on was that there is a housing workshop at Community Futures that's coming up at the end of January. And there will be someone coming from Stats Canada who will be breaking down all of the housing statistics and needs for our area because of the census that we had last year. So I'm looking very forward to that workshop. I'm sure that it will probably confirm what we're doing in terms of going ahead with the tiny homes, but I also think that it'll be very good to get that information. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Moving on to item 5D, which is the disc golf course license of occupation and course budget. From our Manager of Development Engineering Services, resolved committee to hold direct staff to include in 2018 budget process the city's proposed contribution to disc golf budget as presented, and to finalize the license of occupation with the Grand Forks Disc Sports Club for the proposed course site at 2699 68th Avenue, pending the group's formation as a society. Mover, please. Councillor Butler. Any discussion? Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Just a very minor housekeeping item there. I think should that be December 11th regular meeting in the recommendation? The December 11th regular meeting. It's a small housekeeping item.
It's in the second line.
It's just inferred by saying
Yeah,
council.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right there, after December 1, regular meeting.
And if I might add, just while I have the mic here, I'm really excited about this. I don't play disc golf, but I've seen people in the Lower Mainland playing it, and it just looks like so much fun. And I think it'll be a really good use of that land. And I just really wish all the best to the club, and I really hope that it takes off here.
Go ahead now.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's similar to the dog park, right? I mean, a small investment from council can make a huge difference in community. For dog park users, for disc golf, anything that we can do to get people more active and in community, talking with each other off of their gadgets, I think is a great opportunity.
don't forget.
Yeah, I'd just like to concur.
Pickleball, there's another good
It's
example.
a great socializing aspect for the community. Having said that, it's amazing because we were just talking about that at the BCDC meeting last Tuesday, and there was that comment, there was inquiry where we're at, and it was left up to the city now, and so we are discussing it this evening, which is great, so we can wrap this all up. Director Russell was quite curious to where we're at. All right, any other discussion? Oh, in the back.
Les Johnson, GFTV. I was just looking at the agenda last night about the proposed disc golf location in the area. I'm just curious, that stand of trees that is within that area, are they going to be touched? Is that needed or not? It's not going to encroach on where the fireworks are set off, or that's not going to be a problem?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, according to what the gentleman from disc golf said, they were not going to be touching any of the environmentally anything as far as that goes, unless I'm wrong.
I
Okay.
thought it was going to get clear. I thought we were clear cutting.
Through the mayor, without clear cutting, there'll probably be some minor brushing for opening up some of the flyways for the discs, and I think that will also help with the fire management, fire prevention, that kind of thing, because there's a lot of standing brush that's ladder feels to the tall trees, so a little bit of clearing.
Yeah, a bit of trimming and pruning, yeah, exactly. Councillor Butler, then Councillor
Well, I was just going to say that trimming and brushing is also, and using that space is good for deterring other activities or people camping or whatever in that area, so.
And again, I read this stuff, so I found one more little error. It's on page 18 of the agenda, and it just says now therefore in consideration the sum of 10, but then in the brackets it's 1. It's just a little housekeeping thing. I think it should be 1, 0.
Oh,
Page.
yes.
Yeah, it's item C under the whereas on page 18. It's just a minor little thing.
Different page 8.
Oh, yeah, on this document it'd be page 14.
At the top there where it says 19, now you're almost there.
One page up.
There you are.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
See?
Gotcha.
Yeah. Now therefore.
Are we getting $10 or $1?
Yeah, right. We better debate that for half an hour.
Paradox.
But, no, it's there. It's okay.
All right, any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. All right. Moving on to our monthly highlight reports, which is 5E. The recommendation, staff request for council to receive the monthly activity reports from department managers. Recommendation to receive the monthly activity reports from department managers. Please, Councillor Thompson. Discussion, Councillor Butler.
I was going to say something.
Oh, sorry, my apologies. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to compliment our management team on the format of these reports. I think it's just excellent and takes up less paper.
Councillor Butler.
Thanks. I just wanted to get some more information on the wastewater treatment plant project, and I was also wondering if we'd hired, when I was at EBCM, Viola mentioned that they were the contractor for that project, so I was just wondering what part Viola was responsible for.
Our manager. Go ahead, Mr. Reed.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, was there specific you were looking for, or just a general overall?
General overall, and I was wondering what part Viola is playing, if at all they're involved.
I'm not particularly familiar with Viola.
Okay, because they told me at EBCM that they were doing our project.
Right. Ms. Sheets is looking after a lot of the management of the project. So right now where we're at is we're looking at the ultraviolet portion of the project was put into the main project, but we're doing an amendment to our permit, so we had to take that part out. The balancing tank and the thickening tank have been put in. So now we're just looking at getting the RFP out for the building itself. The lagoon desludging, they completed cell 1, they worked on cell 2, and they're coming back in the spring to do what budget allows for desludging in cell 2. So the project's going well. The geotubes have been draining through the fall here, and we look forward to getting as much sludge out and the centrifuge building up early in the spring here. So.
What's our estimated approximate time of completion?
The grant for the project ends, I think it was the end of March 2018. So the Sheets is working on an extension to the grant, but we're looking at getting as much equipment ordered and the building put in and as fast as we can, just in case that doesn't come back with a positive extension. So
there's no real estimated timeline, time of completion at this point?
Yeah, it's either going to be the end of March if we don't get an extension, or hopefully into the summer there where we can finish the project.
So realistically by fall it should be pretty much complete.
I would say by fall, yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Tripp, and then the lady in front.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, just regarding the electrical, I don't know how much you'd be able to give information on that. Just a bit of an update on the voltage conversion program.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have put up the RFP. We had awarded to 3 separate contractors for 5 different legs of the voltage conversion. So we have 1 crew working up Riverside right now. They should be completed that prior to Christmas. We had a contractor come and work for the leg behind Home Hardware in the alley, and there was some I guess concerns or whatever with both contractors working on the same feeder, so they're going to come back in the spring and complete that. So there was a bit of confusion there because they handed out some notices for outages and then they had to go and cancel those outages, but that will pick up in the spring. And then the 3rd contractor will be here in January to do the downtown portion. So we're looking at putting out some communication and getting a bit of a schedule together ahead of Christmas here, hopefully, and get that out to the public so they know what to expect. But this project should be completed by the end of March. So, and then the city will have their portion in actually changing the voltage over to 12 kV.
Thank you.
In the front row. Councilor Bowden.
Thank you, Your Worship. I understand the bylaw enforcement officer isn't here, but if perhaps another member of staff could address researching a possible secondhand dealer and pawn shop bylaw. Can any member of the staff speak to that?
CEO.
Your Worship, yeah, Mr. Bruce is going to be researching a little bit on a pawn shop bylaw. I believe that Sergeant Besky brought it up at the stakeholders meeting the other day, and so there is some research happening. We're not reinventing the wheel, we're looking at what other communities have done, and so we'll be presenting something to council in the new year for consideration.
Thank you.
Councilor Bowden.
Yeah, just 2 more quick questions. Under electrical, the street light repairs, I'm just wondering, I've heard possibly we're removing street lights. I'm just wondering if we are removing street lights. And under dike inspections, just wondering if the dike inspections are complete and how those went.
And to our manager, Mr. Reed.
I'll speak to the streetlights. The streetlights, that's one of the reasons we're looking at going to LED, because there is quite a high maintenance cost to the 150 lights. So we do go and replace them, and if we're in an area and there's a non-standard spacing between them, we will take one out if it comes to our attention. So we have done that in probably 4 places around town. So this will be part of the lighting design where we go by the design and not what was up and in place.
Lady, second row, please, and then Councilor Bowden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make a suggestion regarding replacing transformers. Perhaps in future, it could be planned to be done in spring, summer, or fall. I only have electric heat. Got very cold in my condo. It was very cold. In fact, I had to go to bed, and I wasn't pleased. So maybe in future, you could just consider that aspect of it as well. Thank you.
Councillor Tom, is there a comment on that? Mr. Reed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this project was accelerated due to the Fortis substation. So once we worked some details out with Fortis, it was, I believe, in August, and then we had to put out the RFP to get the work done. And we have to have this project completed by July 1st, or June 30th, I believe. So that's the reason why we had to do it through the fall. We were hoping it was going to start in October and not go right up till Christmas. And then we're trying to buy as much time in the spring, but there is a lot of work to be done to do the voltage conversion. So we are aware it's not the best timing, but we also get the same comments in the summer that people don't want us changing transformers or power outages during the summer. So we do our best to try to limit the outage time and accommodate people best we can.
Councillor Thompson.
I just wanted to comment with respect to the removal of some of the street lights, and there was one removed on my street. We had 3. And the crew came to the door and asked if we had an issue with it, and we didn't. And so I'm sure that they did consult with all of the others in the neighborhood as well. And it's not a problem. It saves the city some money on repairs and electrical consumption, and so I didn't have an issue with it.
Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, just wondering, I think you said there was, like for the LED lights, there was a level 5 and a level 4 or something like that. I'm not quite sure what, if I got the right numbers there. But have you gotten any feedback from any of the community or any of these streets that that have these already put up?
To our manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, we've had a lot of projects that we're trying to wrap up before winter here, so we haven't had a chance to go out to the neighborhoods and do a bit of a survey on the areas that we put them up.
Will that happen, or?
That's the plan, is to get some feedback from people and see what kind of warmth or how they like the lights. So.
Well, if they didn't like it, we'd be hearing about it. Because people in this town write on Facebook or writing letters. So.
I think they're great.
Yeah.
No, it's just that there's 2 different levels. There's like a 5 and a 4.
Yeah.
Which one's better?
Which one's better, the 4 or the 5?
3?
Yeah.
3.
3. What's on the end of that one? 4?
Yeah, the 5,000 is quite a blue light.
Yeah.
So the 4,000 is just like a straight white kind of light, and then the 3 it's got a bit of an orangey tinge to it, I guess you could say. So the efficiencies between them are very, very close, but people just like the certain warmth of light, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So 3 would be more of a warm light effect. Yeah. But the 4 gives out much more impact.
There's lots of debate about some people really like the blue, but we haven't put any of those up.
Right. I'll be the
We'll get letters.
Yeah.
Councillor Ross.
I was
Councillor Butler.
just hoping to have my question answered on the dike inspections.
I'll just ask Mr. Gates to come up and speak to that.
Was the question just what they were?
Yeah, if they're completed and how it turned out.
The report hasn't been finalized, but the actual inspection has been complete in terms of the data gathering. There's a number of spots where there's trails down the dike, which is one of the things we look for. There's a number of spots where there's some encroachment from residents with fences. which is another thing we look for, and a number of spots that are either overgrown with vegetation, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's something to watch. You know, if a tree has a root system in the dike and it falls over, it rips it out. And there's a couple spots with some undercutting, but overall the dikes are there. Of course, they do need to be assessed overall in terms of, for example, the one through South Ruckle was put in a number of years ago, and the rainfall, what do they call those? Anyhow, the rainfall intensity patterns have changed over the last 40 years, so they need to be reassessed according to that, which we're applying for grants right now to do that work. But overall, the dikes there was no major erosion, a couple of spots to note, but nothing too worrisome.
Okay. Unless there's any other questions? All those in favor to receive? Anyone opposed? So carried. All right. No item 6. Item 7A. Proposed bylaws for discussion. Bylaw 1958-A3 to amend the fees and charges bylaw. From our Chief Financial Officer, the recommendation is that the Committee of the Whole selects an option for Schedule J, water service charges, and instructs staff to include Schedule J for that option in the fees and charges amendment bylaw number 1958-A3. Mover, please. Councillor Butler. Discussion. Councillor Butler.
Yeah, looking at the 3 different options, I'd like to suggest option 3. I think it helps balance out some councillors' wishes to have the actual rates implemented right away. It also gives residential customers a more realistic view of their portion of the bill this year, so that when they compare with their mock billing, they'll be able to make a more informed decision of the difference in rates that they'll be expecting in the following year. And our non-residential customers have been on water meters for quite a number of years, so I don't think really need a mock billing process in this. That I think we could just go straight to the actual rate.
Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, this was really interesting. I hadn't expected to see something like this because I thought that when we dealt with the water rates and the 3 options that the non-residential was just included in that. But I appreciate the staff bringing it forward, and certainly it is something for us to consider. I'm sort of wondering though, did we make a commitment through the last option that we voted on? I voted no, so you know, so I'm asking a sort of a hypothetical question, but I'm just wondering, does the community feel like we made a commitment in that, in what was passed? And is this going back on, you know, something that was already voted on and put out there? The other question I would have is, I wasn't sure on the revenue allocations, that chart that's up there, what those last percentage items were. I couldn't quite figure out what that was referring to, this 66 to 34, 47 to 53. Is that the percentage of what then residential would be paying compared to non-residential? Just wasn't understanding that.
Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Those allocations are on the first little table there where it says 100-0. That's the allocation between fixed and consumption charge. So in the case of residential, it's all flat fee, so it's all fixed charge.
Right.
And in the case of the non-residential, it's in the first example would be 66% fixed and 34% consumption.
Great, thank you.
And then the bottom line there is the actual revenue allocation between residential and non-residential.
Thank you.
We already voted on option 2.
Yeah.
No.
Well, this is
something different.
This is a
Gentleman in the second row.
Yeah, Fred Scott, just one question I got here on this option 3, and that is they've got a rate for unmetered multifamily residence strata units, and then they also have a rate for metered strata units. And we've had a water meter since 2003, but they haven't used it since 2008. Under this thing, will we be a metered unit residence?
Our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Rose.
Yes, that particular strata would be considered a metered. We do actually have meter readings from your meter. So,
Oh yeah, they've had it for years.
and that was actually one of the reasons for amending the bylaw, was to get that equity among all the strata and apartment buildings.
Councilor Thompson.
Just for clarification then, so will that building be charged on metered rates rather than flat?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, they would be charged with a metered rate.
Councilor Butler.
Agreeing to the CFO, I was hoping maybe she could explain to council why there's 3 different options coming forward, because I'm not sure if all of council's understanding why we're being asked again to pick an option 1, 2, or 3. I heard Councillor Thompson say we'd already decided on option 2, but my understanding is, sorry, Councillor Hammett, my understanding is this is a different set of rates for this year as opposed to the ones we did for mock billing. So if I could just get further explanation from the CFO.
Go ahead, Ms. Rose.
Okay, during the recent rate review, it was only the question of the residential metering that was decided. So whether to go ahead with the mock billing, and once the mock billing, or for the purposes of the mock billing, which option to use. The question of non-residential already metered buildings wasn't addressed during that review. So what I've done here is just put forward some options as to where council might like to go towards moving perhaps to the new rates that will be, in fact, after the mock billing period, the non-residential buildings would be facing, well, according to the calculations done then, which I've since revised a little bit, they would be facing a 56-cent per cubic meter, or in this case I have 53 cents as a calculation, and they would also be charged based on the size of service. So I've put forward these options to either stay with the status quo, which is the first option, to kind of move towards that 50-some cents by increasing to 25 cents, or to go full out and go with the new rate structure that would be in effect probably after the mock billing.
So the mock billing resolution still stays in place?
Yeah. Yes, that's correct. And that was just that it would be flat charge for residential.
Councilor Butler.
Yeah, the problem is that when the rates were set by previous council for the non-residential, the water rates were set artificially low. And that's what always happens when water meters are put in. The rates are always set initially quite low to get people to buy into the project. Unfortunately, now we see that they've not been paying their equitable share of the water that they're using. And in order to bring it up to not even, I mean, it's only going to be 27%, they're actually using 37% of the water. But to get them to pay up to and close to their fair share, the best we can do right now is the 53 cents per cubic meter.
Councilor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, and I mean, you know, to be fair, and I certainly understand what is being asked of us here is to look at the non-residential. But to be fair, when we were considering the water rates in November, when we were presented with the options from the urban systems, the non-residential charge was in there, and that was what we voted on. I mean, I think, I don't know if, and that's what I'm saying, have we already taken care of this through what we did in going with option 2?
It's my understanding, when you voted previously, that only addressed the billing that would go forward after the mock billing period, and with respect to the length of the mock billing period. But so basically, the residential was going to stay at a flat charge, and the non-residential wasn't really addressed in that.
So now this is going to override once the mock billing is done. Is that what I'm hearing? Or manager of operations?
So with the mock billing, as our chief financial officer spoke to, it was once we had a year's worth of data for the residential, we knew what the consumption was. We didn't know that number before. So we found out that there was some inequities in what the non-residential users were paying. So we looked at what would be a fair way to do this. So we looked at the cost per cubic meter, and we thought, well, if we go ahead and do it right off the bat, there are some significant expenses going to be incurred by some of the non-residential payers. So we just wanted to know if council wanted to transition into that by doing maybe a 1-year step, or whether we just wanted to give them the information so that they could maybe adjust how they do business, or whether council just wanted to go ahead and say, you know what, that's what the rate is, and we've agreed to the process or the ideology of how we came up with the residential equivalency. So if you have a 4-inch water service, you're going to pay more in a fixed rate, and then the flat rate. The water is the water. The cost of the water is there. So it's just whether council wanted to transition into that, or whether they just wanted to bill straight away with what the findings were from the rate review.
Okay, so this is for non-residential, this bylaw. Basically targeted at non-residential because it wasn't covered under the residential portion that we did when we did the mock billing resolution. So now, does this come into effect once the mock billing resolution comes into effect? After a year, or does this come into effect immediately, but the mock billing still stays for the residential at option 2? That's where the confusion is.
So the mock billing council voted to have the mock billing for 1 year, and then it would come into effect with the outcome of the decision from council after the mock billing period.
Based on option 2?
Correct. This would be in effect immediately, but there's options for council to either do an education piece for 1 year, or do a graduated piece to get some non-residential's attention on what's going to be stepped up into the future to get to where council agreed the water rates were. So to get to the 56 cents, it's either we're going to not charge them based on that for this year, we're going to charge half of that, or all of that.
So basically the question still remains the same, and that would partially answer that. In other words, once the mock billing is done, if we vote on option 3, this will supersede option 2 in the residential, and because residential is included in this.
This is what came out of the rate review for the residential. So we cautioned council that there was some balancing, because the residential payers were paying more than their fair share. So the non-residential had some adjustments to make. this is how do we want to make those adjustments.
Okay. So we could in fact opt out of our mock billing then to and implement both immediately too.
The other one's voted on.
Yeah, we just voted on the mock billing piece, so this piece is the non-residential we're focusing on today. Of
No, what I'm
how
saying,
we
it
wanna
could be brought back to
transition.
the table and we could vote on it and make this implement immediately on total. I'm just saying, it is that possibility.
do anything you want.
Yeah, the council, yeah.
Councilor Butler.
Well, I like your idea on bringing it back, actually, Mr. Mayor, because I would prefer to see the Summerland model used, and unfortunately, Urban Systems didn't present that model to us, which is a much more equitable way to go when you have large properties that can't cover their whole property in the time that they're being given. I know of one property right now where they're removing dead trees because once we started enforcing our bylaws, they can't cover their whole property because it's so huge. So with the Summerland rate, you pay based on the square footage of your property, so that we, as an ROCP, we state we're a garden city. We want our city to grow gardens. We want our city to be green and beautiful. And the Summerland procedure has done a very scientific method to determine exactly how much water is required per square foot of your property, how much watering time you need based on 10 pounds of pressure, which is our city limit for pressure. And it's all figured out exactly down to the detail of how much water you need per square footage of your property. So if you'd like to bring it back to the table, I would love to look at that model. I think it's something that could be implemented very easily with the free software that Summerland also used, and they've already done all the work for us. We just have to plug in our numbers for our property sizes, and it
Having
could
said
work.
that, do you know that if Urban System has integrated the Summerland model into their proposal that they did, was that also an initial part of their proposal or their consultation that they did?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did look at the Summerland model and a bunch of other models. The Summerland model didn't meet what we heard from council. Council didn't want it to be punitive, and the Summerland rate goes from about 38 cents a cubic meter to $1.46 or something like that. It's substantial once you surpass that limit. So, I mean, we did try to take into account all of those, but.
Yeah, so that went against the recommendation of Urban System to become punitive. I remember that conversation. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councilor Tripp.
Might be my last comment, I'm not sure. But, well, there's two things. Just a comment on that. Because of the amount of water that's allocated, they base it on needing 1.5 inches of water per week. And they take your 70% of the square footage of your property, assuming that 30% of your property is covered by buildings and paved driveway and stuff. And then they scale it over the months. So during the winter months, you basically everybody gets the same, an apartment dweller and a property owner. Very little difference there because you don't need to water your property in the winter. But then once the spring and summer comes, they up it, incrementally each month, so that the amount of water that you're given is adequate to do 1.5 inches of watering per week. So to me, for people who have gardens and who have shrubbery and lawns and want to keep them green, they can do it. It's like Councillor Butler said, it's a formula. It's very equitable. Nobody can argue with that. And then if you use more than what's been allocated to your aliquot for that month, yeah, you're going to pay for it. So I think it does promote responsible use of water, but it also gives people the amount of water that they need to to keep their places green. And that's really my concern, is that people who have the gardens and the beautiful shrubs and trees and things that reduce their even the heat footprint around their place, will still be able to keep those things going and not be excessively penalized for the amount of water. The second thing I did want to say, and that gets back to these rates, is we're only really dealing with two. I think it's two. You can please correct me if I'm wrong, but from the figures that were given us from Urban Systems, we've got 2 people on a 3-inch or a 4-inch, and 2 people on the 2.5 or 3, and then 16 people on the other. So for non-residential, it's not going to be that many. I'm just bringing it back to this point that it's not that many people or industries or businesses that are going to have the massive amount of use there. Is that right?
Our manager, Mr. Reed.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's, I believe there was 290 that fit that category.
Right. But
out of those, we have some 8-inch connections, multiple connections. There's a few things to look at there, and we felt that there would be significant change to probably, maybe half a dozen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So if I'm understanding this conversation correctly, the flavor of certain councillors here is to bring this back and look at the Summerland model. So my question would be to our manager, Mr. Reed, would the Summerland model, would this software be advantageous to the corporation? Because it is punitive, you said, which is a kind of contradictory. Council didn't want punitive measures.
Well, I can speak, it doesn't have to be punitive. You can put in whatever rate you want for the next.
Well, that's
Right.
we'll get the explanation.
Right. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did look at that. We looked at the Vernon, the regional district surrounding Vernon. They suggest 1 inch of water a week is sufficient. Looking at the different irrigation setups and shade, and they have a great website on that. If it's council's wish, we'll look at it either during mock building, or if council wants to bring it back. It doesn't match perfectly on what we heard with council, like I mentioned before. It does turn out to be punitive. They have a higher flat rate than what our current flat rate is. So there is probably $160, $170 difference a year on the water bills through that district. So it just depends on what council's wish is, and we're happy to look at whatever, but those were some of the reasons why we didn't go down that road.
but all those rates are adjustable, right?
Yeah, but I also recognize that there was a kind of a contradiction there with the statement. That's why I asked you. Councillor Hammond, Councillor Ross.
Yeah, I imagine there would be a rate increase on that proposal, because people with small lots would be subsidizing those for people with larger footprints. So somebody with acreage would be given a larger allotment than somebody with a regular city-sized lot. And from what I understand, the Summerland model basically gave the people with the bigger footprint a bigger allotment before charging them. So it means that water and that water delivery system is still being subsidized by people with smaller lots. It doesn't sound equitable to me.
Is that correct?
No. It's based on your footprint, so you're allowed a higher allotment or a larger footprint.
Okay. Councillor Ross, and then the gentleman in the back.
Thank you. Yeah, I did have a look at the Summerland model as well, and it does, what you've said, thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Hammond. And it also appears that the more money you have, the more water you can use. Because once you use over your allotment, you can continue to use water and pay for it. And there's some people who don't mind doing that because they want their green lawns. And to keep talking about the trees are dying because they're not getting water, does that mean that every tree that didn't die actually got water? Some trees just die, and there's different ways of watering our trees besides overhead sprinklers. I have a very large lot, and I have new trees planted, which I bucket water or run a handheld hose and give them a bit of water. 1.5 inches of water per week is a lot of water, and we don't need to do that. And I think when we looked at this, a lot of those of us on council were talking about water conservation, and now we're just talking about monetizing the use of water, and we're completely ignoring our focus in this region, which is we are prone to drought. We're in an arid environment. We need to conserve water, and that was one of the whole points of this entire water meter project was water conservation. And if people aren't going to conserve water, then we need to give some enforcement. So I'm not in favor of the Summerland model. It doesn't encourage water conservation, and it allows people who have more money and more land to use more water and not think of other ways of managing their gardens or their trees or their shrubs.
Thank you. Gentleman in the back.
Mr. Mayor, relative to the Summerland model that's been under discussion here, it is, somebody suggested it's punitive. It is only if you get extremely high usage relative to the size of your property. Everybody pays the same rate for their first, whatever they're allocated. If you get over your allocation, then it does get punitive, as it should. I don't have an issue with that. But everybody pays the same rate for the first, whatever the meters you require to keep 70% of your property relatively green. But as to being punitive for everybody, that's not the case. The person that uses 500 cubic meters in a billing period, well, and they're allocated that, will pay the same rate as the person who uses 200 cubic meters a month. They will pay the same rate. If they're both allocated the same amount, they will both have the same rate per cubic meter. I'll rephrase that. Their base rates, everybody's the same. Everybody pays the same up to their allocated amount per cubic meter. You get over that, you're going to pay more, no question. But it's not punitive if I have a large lot, it's going to cost me more money than the guy that has, or the resident that has a 50 by 100 foot lot. Absolutely, and it should. I don't question that. But I'm going to pay the same rate per cubic meter until I get over the 70%.
We understand that.
Or sorry, over the allocation for the 70% of my property. So as to being punitive, it is not, unless you're really stupid and piss water away. You know, the other issue was, I suggested that we use the Summerland model, not their rates. They're totally adjustable. You put in any numbers you want. You just plug them in. It's a spreadsheet. You just plug them in and use it.
I was first.
No, Councillor Thompson, and then Councillor Hunter, you do your follow-up.
Just that, listening to the discussion and the debate and the different models and so on and so forth, we know in Grand Forks what it costs to operate the system. We have to generate sufficient funds to finance the operations. The fairest way, and I firmly believe that it is a charge per cubic meter. And if you use a lot of water, then you're going to pay for a lot of water. When you have seniors living in a condo or an apartment or a small house, they're not going to use the amount of water that a family of 4 with teenagers that shower 2 or 3 times a day.
If you get them to.
Well, yeah. And the laundry and stuff are going to use considerably more water. As far as gardens go, I've heard Councillor Ross say on several occasions, and I'm not a gardener, so I can't attest to that, but that there are ways to conserve water and to still get sufficient water to your plants and your gardens and your trees and your whatnot. We can argue until tomorrow on the best way to do this, but I'm going to support a flat rate, or not a flat rate, but a meter rate per cubic meter. And I, again, would really like to get on with this.
Just a quick comment, Councillor Hammond, if I may have your indulgence. Exactly what Councillor Thompson said, and that was the reason my question was, maybe it wasn't phrased properly, because when I said the Summerland model, does it impact on the corporation? I was referenced to because of our delivery model. Summerland, are they on a well system? If not, then the delivery model is completely different in the conceptual approach because of the fact we have pumps, which is mechanical devices, which will cost way more cost maintenance-wise in the long run. So that was the nature of the question when I said, does it impact the corporation monetarily, is probably the proper way to put it.
Mr. Mayor, that was a concern of ours, is if we have our 5 wells running with extended, I guess, amounts of water that is available to people, it does cause some operational issues for us. We want to try to maintain a pump that's not in, we don't want all our pumps running at once to fill up a reservoir, or if we have a fire, or if we just have a pump that goes down for some reason. We want some redundancy in the system. And in July and August, it's a bit of a challenge in some parts of the day. This year with Bylaw, they were able to enforce it, and it spread it out a bit, which was great. We didn't have 5 pumps running a lot of the time, but we could run into that issue if we increase the allotment significantly.
In other words, what I'm saying is it's not about the water, but it's the delivery model that we have here in this community, which could be of concern. Costs as far as running the pumps, electrical, costs of possible maintenance, where a pump goes, and so on and so forth. This is the delivery model we have here, which is a bigger concern than, let's say, comparatively to other communities, which do not have the same delivery model.
I believe it was Summerlin that shut their water off to do maintenance for 3 days this year. So I believe they do have a different
yeah, they've got
delivery.
three different water systems in Summerland, so they're dealing with a whole lot more than we are. Ours is much simpler compared to theirs. But anyways, it's Councillor Hammond.
Councillor Hammond, go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of off topic now, but just to respond to what the gentleman was saying regarding the Summerland method, and he's right. You know, everybody's paying for their fair share, but the problem is it's after their allotted amount, and that allotted amount is based on how much land you have. So, you know, somebody with a city lot, a flat rate of $150 a year, somebody with 3 acres, flat rate of $150 a year. And that's, you know, it just doesn't seem fair that they're only paying after they've gotten their allotted share, which is probably triple or 6 times the amount that the person with the city lot has on their allotment. Conservation. So, yeah, it doesn't. So. On the other note of what we're actually discussing here with regards to the non-residential rates, I thought we had put it all into the same bucket the last time when we voted on it, but if not, then I don't vote for an immediate increase. I'd like to see it either transitioned or at least give the businesses warning, but I don't want to see it jump automatically so that they have a huge increase in 1 year. We're giving the residential a year to mock billing so that they can see what their actual fees are going to be in a year's time. And I think that if we increase it slightly for industrial or the commercial, or even give them a mock billing along with their actual bills so that they can see what their usage is and what their new fee is going to be. But I don't want to see it jump overnight.
That's good.
I kind of like what Councillor Hammond has said there in terms of giving them a year, just like the residential have a year. But having said that, maybe were we to vote on one of these options here, 1, 2, and 3, that could be what they could get as a mock billing for a year. I don't know how difficult that would be for staff to do. And if that were the case, I would vote on option 2. Option 2, it satisfies the service charge size. So you've only got a couple of industries that have got the big huge ones. 2, I think, on the report from that we got in November. And then there's 2 that have the 3.5. And then everybody else has the smaller ones. So, you know, I don't think there's going to be, that's not going to be punishing, that service size fixed charge. Am I right in that, thinking that way?
through you, Mr. Mayor, not all the service sizes were included in the report, but we do have some more that are 4-inch or 6-inch.
Even higher. So that would be a negotiated rate with them, would it then be?
Yes, we, due to the complexities of some of those, we did recommend a negotiated rate for those.
So even more so, would it then not be a good idea to do a mock for them too, so that this negotiated discussion can be occurring between the city and... Because we're going to have to start fine tuning all of this. We're making a recommendation today at either option 1, 2, or 3, but we're not quite sure if they're going to bite into it, so to speak, or that they'll be kicked blowback from it. So.
Right. So the way we based our numbers were for the residential equivalency. And once you get to a certain point, then we went with the negotiated rate. And there was a few reasons for that. But the big piece is the consumption charge for water right now is artificially low for that class. So it's just whether council wants to do a step process or just implement it right away.
The gentleman in the back first, and Councillor Butler, and this has been waiting, and then Councillor Hammett, did you want to?
Yeah, I just want to talk.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The information that I received from the city and off the websites mostly was that it has been determined that the cost to produce a cubic meter of water is about $1.11. Okay, so we're going to produce 832,000 cubic meters next year. We need that times $1.11 to break even if it's revenue neutral, as that was pretty much agreed on, and that is down from $1.1 million that was produced last year.
You keep using the word produce, you mean deliver.
Deliver, okay, all right. Comes out of the ground and goes to the end user. How's that? If the number is 832,000 times $1.11, and we reduce the industrial, that includes the industrial or the non-residential, all of a sudden if we reduce them down to the 12.7 cents they're currently paying, there's a huge shortfall. Where's that money going to come from?
Not reducing them. We can't be.
I mean, don't ask us, that are not industrial users, to pick that tab up. I mean, these are numbers that have been provided. You said that this is how much we're going to produce next year. That's down 25%, although the expenses have remained the same. But that we're reducing 25% of the volume. Going to keep the expenses the same. That's a bit of a tough sell, but I understand some of it. But don't ask me as a residential user to subsidize Interfor because they're going to get a 25% per cubic meter rate, and I'm paying 56 cents. I have that a pretty tough swallow. But the city's going to be short if you don't come up with an average of 56 cents.
Always bearing in mind, though, if you penalize a corporation like Interfor,
it's a political issue.
Careful what you wish for.
Absolutely.
Interfor.
And I understand that. I absolutely understand that. But it's huge. You know, you said it costs $1.11. Where's the shortfall going to come from?
I realize that.
If you produce 37% of the water at less than $1.11 or at less than 56 cents charge.
Well, that's a common problem because the same applies if eventually we're metered and everybody conserves and the city goes in the red.
That's what
So
you get the big bucks for up here.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very easy calculation. Were we? Councillor Butler and Councillor Hammond.
I was just going to say this already is. If you go with option 2 or 3, it still is a step process. We're not getting them with their full amount because we're only asking them to pay for 27%. And you've been very adamant about user pay. If you use, you pay for it. I hope you also mean that for the non-residential because they're using 37% and you're only asking them to pay 27%. So this is a step process. Going to 56 cents for them is a step towards 37%. It's still not adequate for what they're using.
Thank you. Councillor Hammond.
Yeah,
then
but when it goes to 25 cents in this step process for option 1 or 2, it's still double what they're paying currently. So it's going to hit them hard. Now, I just want to remind everybody too that our commercial property tax rates are the highest in the Kootenays. And it's disproportionately high. They pay a much higher percentage for property taxes here on commercial property and industrial property than anywhere else in the Kootenays. And so, you know, they're kind of at their threshold. Now, we could always take a look at reducing commercial property taxes and bringing it more equitable, and that burden would go back onto the residences to pay their fair share. So, I mean, it balances out. We've given them a break with their water usage. We're talking about doubling it. In increments. Right now it's looking at 50%, but you've also got to consider that they're paying way bigger share, the lion's share, of their property taxes to operate the city.
But their water rates are going to go up 400%.
Right now it's going to go up, it looks like 200%.
Well, no, it's going to go from 12.7
up
to
to
56
eventually
cents.
53.
Or 53?
Yeah, up eventually, but if we went with option 1 or 2, it would be a 200% increase.
But okay,
to start with.
Where is that 337,000 cubic meter shortfall at roughly 25 cents cubic meter? Where does that come from? If it costs us $1.11 to produce it.
That's assuming conservation. That's the reduction.
But it still is $1.11. That's what the figures show. I mean, call it what you want. We produced $1.1 million at $1.11. Now we're going to produce 832,000 at $1.11, according to the numbers that are available. But if you produce 832,000, 37% of that goes to industrial, and they're only paying half of the 56 cents. Now you're going to be short.
But if we're producing less, our cost per unit should go down.
But there's not a lot of variable costs in producing the water. The electricity is really the only variable cost.
Wear and tear on the pumps.
That's electricity. I mean, we're going to produce 25% less water, but we're not going to lay off 2 staff members.
That's where your costs are and stuff.
We won't debate this any further. I appreciate your comments, sir, but this is not an issue for debating back and forth. To the lady in the second row.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have to add my 2 cents worth with the gentleman in the back. I'm a taxpayer. I live in a condo building that I hope most of you know we've been paying more for our water than any apartment building in town, which is inequitable. And as a taxpayer, individually, each homeowner has been paying fractionally more for years than Interfor. I know you're afraid that Interfor will leave, but could you not increase their rates somewhat so it would be more equitable?
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, but you're not getting anywhere as far as I can see. You're saying, well, we don't want to do that because, you know, they might leave. If they're a business that is making money, then they're going to pay to continue making that money.
That's what we're talking about. Increasing.
But everything I hear you saying is we don't want to bother Interfor. What about your taxpayers? I'm sick of subsidizing Interfor, and many more people in town are feeling the same. It's not a fair system. So please, instead of talking about discussion for the next year, do something. Make it more equitable, please. I'd be a happier taxpayer.
Just to comment on your statement, we're not afraid to poke the bear, as you put it.
Well, good. I commend you for that.
It has to be equitable, and it has to be on a fair basis, because as the other councillor member regarding tax, if, and I'm not using this as a fear tactic, should Interfor decide to up and leave, it would create such a vacuum in this community that everybody's head would be reeling. So we always have to bear this in mind. It's not that we're catering to them, it's not that we're appeasing them, but we have to look at it in a realistic way. And as it's a very tough decision a lot of times for council and myself, but we do look at every aspect. I assure you of that.
I appreciate it.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to our CFO. Legislatively, are we not, is there not a cap on the the tax rate that can be charged to major industry? I thought there, seemed to me that there was.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I believe there is in the multiplier, and I don't have the information obviously at hand. I know there's a cap on the utility class 3, I believe it is. So yeah, I think it's on the multiplier, and that would be the difference in rate between the industrial, the actual mill rate between the industrial and resident and class 1.
I somewhere in the back of my brain, I thought it was $40 per thousand was the cap, and maybe I am confusing the utilities with the industrial.
Yes, I believe it's $42, and that's utilities.
Thank you.
Sir, did you want to speak?
Yeah, just to reflect on what I've heard here. Those of us who are retirees or aren't going to move on, we're stuck here in this community, and the two major industries we're talking about, both Roxel and Interfor, these are just one in a stable of plants that they have spread out over North America, the globe. So it's not as if this is the only place that they're stuck. So if they shut down this plant for a while because it becomes too expensive, it's not as big a hit on them as it will be on us. If we've gotten into the situation where they haven't been paying their fair share, is it their fault or is it our fault? If we have to tighten it up and adjust it, do we want to hit them with an impact wrench, or do we want to just ratchet it up? Because you hit them with an impact wrench, especially Interfor with softwood lumber duties going and everything else, and they have operations in the States as well. It's not a big deal for them to go, oh, well, Grand Forks has become expensive, and we'll just shut it down for a while. Then we come back in 5 years, but during that time, that whole tax load shifts to the rest of us.
That's right.
And that's why we have to worry about Interfor saying, oh, you're too expensive. You know, we're damned if we do, and really damned if we don't type thing. So that's the problem here, you know. I don't know how we got into the situation where they're not paying it. I don't think it's their fault.
No.
And the jobs that they create, the money recirculates, that revenue recirculates in the community again.
Yeah, and if those jobs go away and that revenue goes away, that taxes paying into the system goes away, guess who has to pick up the shortfall? The rest of us who are stuck here, who don't have the option of going, oh, we have other places in other places of the world we don't have to worry about. Anyways, that's my 2 cents.
Councilor Tripp.
So it seems to me then that, the dilemma is, do we decide to ramp it up a bit or a lot, depending on what we feel is okay, or are they going to pay really what they have been using, or are we just going to kind of see what maybe going another, 50% would do? But the other thing is that, the industrial users are not able to conserve. Like, they use what they use. And so if a lot of our motivation is based on conservation, then we've kind of got two opposing principles going here. And I just don't know how we reconcile that. Again, do we just say, okay, sock it to you, we're going to start that in January, and I think possibly the staff is asking us to bring this in immediately, or whenever this policy would take place. Or do we give them a year to take a look at the numbers? Could the staff give them what it would cost through mock billing for a year with whatever option we choose, 1, 2, or 3, if it's different than the status quo that we voted in last time?
I think without knowing exactly what the increase would be to Interfor, it's hard to have this discussion, because if it's an extra $5,000 for a large company, that's no big deal. And if we're talking between the difference between a $2,500 increase and a $5,000 increase, it might not even be worth discussing. It might not be that large of an impact to them. We don't know because we don't have the numbers.
My recommendation to council would be to postpone this to the January meeting, the decision. That's my recommendation. Councilor Ross.
Yeah, actually, it's not really a true statement to say that corporations or industries can't conserve water or learn to conserve water. There are measures that are taken in many companies or businesses that use water, doing simple staff training. One of them is putting shut-off valves at the end of hoses and letting hoses, instead of having to walk back and turn it off at the wall, they have shut-off valves at the end of the hoses. And I have talked to some of the staff who said that hose just actually runs into a drain. You need a shut-off valve there. Just simple measures taken, educating staff on how to begin to conserve water does make a big difference, and there are measures they can take. And I do agree. I think I wouldn't mind postponing this until January.
To do more consultation with major industries to so-called implement
I don't
different
think
ideas.
the city should be blamed for. I think I completely agree with Les. The pressure on the forest industry in British Columbia, Interfor is shutting down plants and moving to the U.S. And now we're exporting raw logs to the United States, and they want to do that more and more. So I don't think it should be, city should be blamed for putting up water rates marginally and shutting down Interfor. There are other players, factors in play there.
You want to see it, Councilor Tripp? I know you're next.
Your Worship, just for Council's information, if you postpone this, it's going to be holding up the fees and charges by law for an additional month.
I think we just do a gradual thing.
I don't believe that a month is a big subsequent issue. Just so that we get it right.
Well, I don't think I'm going to have any visions.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, would it be possible if we did defer it for a month to get what these actual costs might be for these various options? Would that be possible? Because you know what they're using, right?
Option one would
Yeah, I'd go for option.
Yeah, we wouldn't need a month for that. We could give council that number. It's just we didn't want to broadcast that number.
Oh,
okay.
Well.
Because I like the idea what you mentioned earlier, do it in a step process, but not a subsequent severe step process. So if there's a way to implement it in a step process where we come on gradually, or give them a timelines where, like, we have a mock billing, because I feel that if we're going to implicate these corporations with this immediate costing increase, then we should eliminate the mock billing on the residential, and we should be on the same page totally in the municipality. It's not really fair to industry, which is supporting the greater part of this community, to be hit with an increase, and yet we're getting away with mock billing. That's my view. Councillor Butler, or Councillor Tripp, I believe you had.
Oh, no, that
Okay, Councillor Butler.
I'm done, yes.
So, yeah, the industry, they've already had this billing process for years, so I don't see the need for them to have a mock billing process. They're not switching from a flat rate to a metered rate. They've been watching their water usage and paying based on their water usage for years. There's nothing new for them here. The other thing I'm wondering is how easy it is for Interfor to switch over to using more of their well. I believe they do have a well, and would they start using more from that rather than the city services?
Based on that comment, that's exactly why I recommended a bit of consultation, because we do not want to be in the business of telling them how to run their business, and that's exactly by doing that what we're doing, and that's not really a good avenue to go down, where you're telling a big corporation how to run their business and how to do it. I think we should use the consultation approach and work together with this problem. I'm going to call a quick recess. Go ahead.
I just wanted to quickly say that it's not just industry that's going to be impacted by the decision that we make, it's commercial as well, our businesses. So I would just encourage us to really think about this, make a decision that's going to benefit the community as a whole. Rates have to go up, we do know that, and perhaps option 2 would be the more appropriate option. It's increasing, but not substantially. I mean, it's doubling what they're currently paying. And quite frankly, I would be prepared to put a resolution forward at this moment that council consider going with option 2, so that our fees and services and charges and bylaw can be brought into effect at the appropriate time.
Councillor Hammond?
The only one that I see that's similar to what they're currently paying is option 1, where we see what their fixed charge is, and then we've got we've doubled the charge for the per cubic meter. So we know that they're getting a double, they're doubling in their fee after the flat rate is exceeded. But when we get into option 2 and option 3, we have no idea because we're blind. We don't know what that base rate is based on their service size. So we can't say that they're only going to get a double increase by going with option 2 because we don't know what the service size is or what their base rate would be based on the service size. So option 1 is the only one that would be
It explains it further
closest.
down if you scroll down in the document.
I will listen to the lady in the second row, and then we're going to call for a quick recess where we can discuss something with staff.
I would like to see you, I would like to see you further research this. Have you really, has staff really looked into the Summerland way of doing it? Well, it sounds like a very good way to do it.
Yeah, they have, as I had mentioned, Urban Systems did incorporate that into their studies, and it was looked at. But in any event, I'm going to call a 15-minute recess. Call this meeting back to order. All right. So where were we?
Water rates. I put a motion on the floor.
Oh, yeah.
To option 2.
Well, let's block that one too.
So I guess let's do that.
Still not sure.
So,
Councillor Tripp?
yeah. Thank you, Mayor Conrad. So looking at option 2 then, so the service size, and I think there's a fee schedule somewhere down further on in the documents that are attached to that. That would determine what each user would get depending on their connection. And then the figure that the CFO has provided there with the 53 to 47%, that would indicate that 53% of their charge is based on the fixed and 47% on the user. Is that how I'm understanding that? On what they use?
Yes, that's correct.
That's
for the non-residential.
Okay, thank you. So that's fairly equitable there in terms of the way they're being charged.
So unless there's any other discussion, I'm going to call the
I
question.
just have one, and it's not on water.
Then you're not talking.
Well, we have a motion on the table right now.
Is that,
Your
are
motion.
you speaking to your motion?
You're speaking to your motion, or are you?
No, I was just, no, we'll just.
We'll digress later.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried.
Sorry, for clarification, Your Worship.
Could I have your identity for the record?
Oh, Kate Sailors for the Grand Forks Gazette. For clarification, Your Worship, the motion on the table is to accept option 2.
Go ahead.
So I'm wondering, council had no consensus when we went on recess, and then came back and came to a unanimous vote. Was there a discussion while council was on recess?
Not a discussion, just an informative clarification, which is not for public consumption at this particular point in time, but will be released. The numbers, we needed clarification without making a decision. Go ahead.
I was under the impression that council was not supposed to discuss council business.
We weren't discussing. Like I said, this was not a discussion or a debate. It was just for information from our staff.
That the rest of us shouldn't be privy to at this point.
At this particular point in time, yes. But you will not be left out totally. You will find out when the time is right.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So we've done that one. We had a motion, but we did not finish. Yeah, we did. So the first part is done. Select an option, select an option. Okay, next one is, and further resolved that Committee of the Whole recommends to Council to give the first 3 readings of the City of Grand Forks Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 1958-A3 2018 at the January 15, 2018 regular meeting. Move it, please. Councillor Thompson, any discussion? All those in favor? Any?
I just had a question on the sewer rates. Okay,
For CFO.
Thank you, Your Worship. On the metered user fees, sewer usage charge per 1/3 cubic meter of metered water. So so they're being charged only, if they use a cubic meter of water, they're only going to be charged 1/3 of that for sewer, so it's a reduction in the
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's correct. And that's the actual existing rate or the rate structure that's in effect.
Councillor Butler, then Councillor Tripp.
You know, at first glance, I thought, well, this is a good way to make sure that your agricultural water, that you're not being billed for sewer on your agricultural water, right? Because in the summertime, we water our gardens and we don't want to pay sewer. So 1/3 seems fair. But if everybody only pays 1/3 and you do that all year round, does that then actually give you a discount on your agricultural rate? Or you still have to make up whatever it is, $800,000 per year to operate the utility, and if everybody's paying 1/3 on their water all the time, I don't see that then giving a discount on your agricultural water. I think if you did that in the summer months, it would make sense, but in the winter months, when, for 6 months out of the year when no one's irrigating, you're paying the full rate of everything going down your sewer because that's actually what's happening. And in the summertime, then you would pay 1/3. But if you do it all year round, and you have to make up the bottom line no matter what, I think then you're still going to end up paying for your agricultural water going down the drain. Does that make sense? Oh.
Councillor Tripp, we didn't get an answer to that.
Well, I was just going to comment that we decided at this time, in light of the big changes in the potential water rates part of the bylaw, that we would make minimal changes to the sewer rate structure at this time and review it, down the line. So it's basically just consistent with what's already existing, other than an increase to meet, revenue requirements.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, and again, if we're coming back to what's fair, then should apartment users, because they don't have any land, be made to pay the full amount of that. And that's a discussion for another time. But one thing I did want to clarify here on item 3.1 in the bi-monthly flat rate user fees, that single family dwelling or duplex at 85, is that our current rate was 78.30 if I'm correct? So is that an 8% increase over what we're currently paying?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that would be. And how we came up with the sewer rates actually was to look at the differential between the fixed portion, the fixed charge for the non-residential users, and determine the residential flat rate based on how much consumption they would have. So that actually worked out to a differential of $10.78, whereas the difference in price is actually $10. So.
Thank you.
Gentleman in the back.
Mr. Mayor.
Please identify yourself, sir, for the record. So
Gary Jarvis. I live down in Johnson Flats, and this is probably best addressed to the CFO. I know I'm not worried about the sewer rates because I'm on my own septic system, as are about 55 other residents down in Johnson Flats, so it really doesn't affect us. But can I ask how many residents in Grand Forks are not on the city sewer? Would we know that? Would 100 be a reasonable number?
According to the data I have, I believe actually I do have the numbers. I actually looked at the water, and the difference between the water and the sewer is about 250.
Oh, okay, I didn't know, thank you.
Your Worship, there's one additional item that we wanted to draw attention to, and it was in the administrative fees, and most things in terms of planning and development are in another bylaw, but we were looking at the subdivision application fees, which are in this one, and ours haven't been changed for many years, and they were grossly out of proportion with other municipalities. So one of the changes, instead of being $100 for the original parcel and then $100 for each new lot created, we brought in a pre-application meeting and letter of requirements, which goes out to tell you what the developer needs to bring in for the application, and then the examination fee of $400 for the original parcel plus $100 per new parcel created. Now, for comparison, the city of Kelowna is $2,000 for the examination fee. City of Fernie is like a few $100s for the examination fee. We're now, if we look at the actual costs of running these can be several days of work to institute, so it's still not cost recovery, but the idea is that you actually want to encourage the developer, rather than piecemealing their subdivision, to come in and do multiple lots at the same time, so the original examination fee. So I believe Kelowna's is at full cost recovery, and they have a 2% per year increase and that kind of thing. But we tried to set a middle ground that was still, much lower than the new standard for a lot of municipalities, but ensures that developers have skin in the game at the beginning.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you for that. I think that's excellent. And we don't want to discourage development either, and I think that these rates are right on.
Maybe in the third row.
I would have liked to have seen Gloria Cook. The report on the fees, the new fees, would have been, it would have been good to see the existing rates comparison. Difficult to make any real, without researching all of that, without any real decision on this, and therefore input.
That's the original.
And I guess just a comment. The fees and charges bylaw also has that change for not requiring the $25 fee to refund overpayments in the monthly payment plan, and that's coming forward tonight. So that was another change on there, right?
Mr. Mayor, yes, we have that now so that you're allowed one free refund per year, and because the bylaw won't come into effect until January. The end of January, then that's why I have that request for this evening's meeting. It's just to cover that period of time.
Okay, if there's no other discussion, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Okay, moving on to item 7B, Bylaw 1973-1 A1 to amend water regulations from our Chief Financial Officer. The recommendation the committee of the whole recommends to council to give the first 3 readings of the water regulations amendment bylaw number 1973-A3 2018 at the January 15, 2018 regular meeting. Over, please. Councillor Ross.
So just for clarification.
Go ahead.
So the only change we're seeing here is just to remove that schedule with the fees and put it on the fees and charges bylaw. There's no other changes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's correct, with both the sewer and the water.
Okay. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Moving on to 7C, bylaw 1974 to amend sewer regulations. Again, from our Chief Financial Officer, recommendation is committee of the whole recommends to council to give the first 3 readings of the sewer regulations bylaw number 1974-2014 at the January 15, 2018 regular meeting. Mover, please, Councillor Rossage. Any discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. 7D, bylaw 2022, new solid waste service. From Outside Works, recommendations committee all recommends to council to give the first 2 readings of the solid waste service regulations and rates amendment bylaw number 2022-2017 at the January 15, 2018 regular meeting. A mover, please. Councillor Thompson. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. No information items, no correspondence items, no late items. Question period from the public. There are. Hearing none. Now move to the in-camera resolution. Chief Administrative Officer, the in-camera. Subject matter immediately following the committee of the whole meeting, council will hold an in-camera meeting. Recommendation is the council convene an in-camera meeting as outlined under section 90 of the community charter to discuss matters in a closed meeting which are subject to section 91A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality. Section 91D, the security of the property of the municipality. E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements. If the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interest of the municipality. And G, litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality. Further be it resolved that persons other than members, officers, or other persons to whom council may deem necessary to conduct city business will be excluded from the in-camera meeting. Mover, please. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Butler.
Do you have your mic on?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to have to vote against this agenda. There's just a couple items on here that I think really need to be discussed in public, and maybe it'll become apparent as we go through it that it's something that is in camera, but at this point, from what I've seen from the agenda, I would prefer those 2 items discussed in public.
Councillor Ross.
As always, I would just encourage council to be cognitive of that, and when we discuss something in camera, as soon as possible, we can bring it out of camera and release it for public information as quickly as possible, even as soon as tonight.
Councillor Butler.
And I'm hoping that that's what will happen, but unfortunately at that point, the public doesn't get to hear the debate that goes on behind the scenes and why we've come to that decision, and they also aren't able to contribute to that in question period to be able to make comments on it that can then, you know, influence council's decisions on different topics in the long run. So, yeah, I'll still vote against it, and hopefully, yeah, we can release as much as possible at the end.
Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, I too, I also have issues with a couple of items on the agenda that I really don't see why they need to be in camera. So I will be voting against it too, for the same reasons that Councillor Butler's put forward.
Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I ask which two items you are having issues with that preclude you from?
I don't think we can.
I can give you the numbers.
No.
I can give you the numbers on the agenda, but I mean, it doesn't really matter.
No, I'm sorry, I meant the numbers in the not the actual items, but which clauses.
So it'd be 4A and
4A?
Yeah, and
98, do you mean
and 8C.
She's meaning the section.
Of the recommendation of the resolution, you're not going to?
Oh, sorry, I was talking about the in-camera item.
Is it 91A?
Sorry, I don't have the special meeting open on my...
Well, you've got the recommendations, so...
Yeah, I'm looking at the in-camera items that I don't feel comfortable discussing in private, that I would prefer to see as public agenda items. I'm not sure, I don't have the special meeting open on my computer, so I can't tell you which sections those fall under. Okay, so I'm not sure which ones these fall under, that's what I'm saying. I don't see them falling under these items. I know, okay, one of them is supposed to go under D, but I don't see any security to the municipality being harmed by talking about one of those items.
We don't have enough.
Unfortunately, that will remain to be seen once we go on camera, so.
Yeah, like I said, it might come through, but maybe that information needs to be provided to council ahead of time so that we can see that, because right now it looks pretty benign.
But we have to protect the municipality. Yes. And so when we can release the information, it will be released. And
yeah, but the debate, the public doesn't get to see the debate, and that's the issue.
Well, sometimes they do.
Not in camera.
Well, sometimes we're not always making decisions in camera. Sometimes we're hearing the information and deciding whether or not it's something that we want to actually entertain.
I'm going to call a question. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Councillor Butler, Councillor Tripp are opposed. Motion is carried. May I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Ross. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Meeting's adjourned.